The aliens had long ago perfected the art of harvesting sentient species. Their empire spanned countless worlds, and the acquisition of labor and entertainment was their trade. On Earth, humans were seen as a perfect resource, pliable, adaptable, and full of untapped potential. To the aliens, Earth's population was little more than livestock, to be captured and exploited for their amusement and needs. In the dead of night, ships of unknown design descended on unsuspecting cities, abducting humans in waves, with no regard for age, sex, or status. In their hands, humans were nothing more than valuable commodities. The aliens were meticulous in their planning. A highly advanced species, they had mastered many technologies, including faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation, and even control of biological processes. They viewed their new human captives with amusement, seeing them as weak and fragile, not unlike animals ready to be tamed. The humans were thrown into massive, sterilized holding cells aboard enormous ships, their movements restricted, and their fates sealed by the alien superior technology. The captives were offered no comfort, no respite. Any attempt at resistance was swiftly and ruthlessly crushed. Earth's population of the abducted was fragmented, scattered across multiple vessels and worlds. Some were sent to work as laborers, performing menial tasks in harsh environments where the alien overlords could observe them like lab animals. Others were deemed more valuable, kept as sources of entertainment, subjected to cruel and unusual games that tested their endurance, their pain thresholds, and their willingness to obey. In the alien eyes, humans were insignificant, little more than toys for their amusement. They were conditioned to believe that humans lacked the will or ability to ever rise against them. The first days were marked by confusion and fear. The humans were not prepared for the horrors that awaited them. Many were paralyzed by shock, struggling to comprehend the reality of their captivity. Yet even in these moments of vulnerability, the aliens made one critical mistake. They underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the overwhelming force they faced, humans, unlike any other species the aliens had encountered, fought not only with their fists but with their minds. In the beginning, resistance was futile. Every effort to break free was crushed instantly. Any human who dared to resist was punished. Public executions, forced labor, and harsh punishment were meant to break their wills, but the opposite happened. Instead of breaking, the humans began to observe. They watched the aliens' every move, every shift in behavior. The fear and panic slowly turned into something else, a deep, seething anger, fueled by the realization that the aliens had made a grave mistake. They had assumed that humanity would simply fold, but they failed to account for one thing: humans' ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight back. The first signs of change were subtle. Small groups of humans began to form. They didn't yet understand how to use the alien technology, but they began to talk. In whispered conversations, they compared notes, shared observations, and formed plans. The language of their captors, alien and strange, started to take shape in their minds. The more they heard it, the more they understood. Slowly, the humans began to piece together the secrets of the alien communication system. With time, they learned enough to understand commands, to decode basic messages, and to mimic the language with remarkable accuracy. In the midst of this silent resistance, one human, a former linguist, began to see the potential in the alien language. She realized that it could be the key to unlocking much more than just communication. The aliens' language was intricate, layered with nuances that, if understood, could provide critical insights into their technology and culture. This human, along with a handful of others, began to study the alien speech day and night. They memorized it, practiced it, and began to speak it among themselves. Once the language barrier was broken, the next hurdle was the technology. The aliens' machinery was incomprehensible to the untrained eye, but humans had something the aliens couldn't predict: a hunger for knowledge. They had never seen anything quite like the alien tech. Its power, its precision, its intricacies. Yet, in every human's heart, there was a thirst for discovery. While the aliens overlooked their captives as primitive beings, the humans studied every piece of technology they could get their hands on. They listened, watched, and learned. It wasn't long before the first humans began to understand the machines. They didn't operate them yet, but they recognized patterns: the flow of energy, the connection between components. Slowly, they began to experiment. At first, it was a single light bulb that flickered to life. Then, a door that opened with a quiet hum, activated by a foreign device one human had found and reverse-engineered. The aliens had thought their technology was foolproof, impossible to decipher. But to the humans, each small success was a triumph, proof that they weren't helpless. The captors, meanwhile, noticed the subtle shifts. Humans, once docile and compliant, were now becoming more curious. They started to take notice of small details, how the walls hummed with power, how their captors' weapons were never quite as secure as they seemed. The tension in the air was palpable, but the aliens dismissed it as nothing more than a fleeting moment of defiance. They never expected the humans to grow in such unpredictable ways. What the aliens didn't see was the growing potential within their prisoners. Humans, driven by desperation and a primal urge to survive, were learning faster than the aliens had anticipated. As the days passed, it became clear the humans were no longer just passive victims. They were beginning to understand their situation, and they were no longer willing to accept their role as prey. The power dynamics were shifting. The aliens, for all their advanced technology and overwhelming force, had overlooked one crucial thing: the adaptability of the human mind. Humans were not merely learning to survive. They were learning to fight back. And the aliens, despite their superiority, had no idea what was coming. The harvest had begun, but now the tables were about to turn. As the days passed, the humans who had once been completely overwhelmed by their alien captors began to experience something extraordinary. They began to adapt. At first, it was subtle, a shift in behavior, a change in attitude. But soon, it became undeniable. They were learning. They were not only learning to understand the alien language, but they were also beginning to grasp the intricacies of alien technology and their captor systems in ways that no one, least of all the aliens themselves, could have predicted. The humans started by studying their captors' language. It wasn't just a way to communicate. It was a key to unlocking the rest of the alien world. The linguistic breakthrough came when one of the humans, a former translator who had been captured during the initial wave, began to make connections between the alien words and the actions she observed. The language, once an impenetrable mystery, slowly began to make sense. The patterns of speech, the structure, the context, each phrase seemed to correspond to specific actions or technologies. The more they understood the language, the more they could glean from their captors' interactions. This knowledge opened doors. The humans began to piece together fragments of the alien culture, their power structures, and their vulnerabilities. They realized that the aliens were not a monolithic race, but a coalition of species with varying motivations and objectives. Some were soldiers, others bureaucrats, and some simply opportunists, greedy and lazy. This discovery was crucial because it showed that the aliens were not invincible. They could be divided and their weaknesses exploited. Meanwhile, in the dark corners of the holding pens, humans began to study the alien technology that surrounded them, the devices used to restrain them, the strange tools that control their environment, the massive energy shields that protected their captors' ships. All of it became a subject of intense scrutiny. Humans, with their innate curiosity and problem-solving abilities, began to break down the systems. It wasn't easy. They lacked the formal training to understand the tech at first, but necessity, coupled with the desperation to survive, fueled their progress. They started small. Some learned to manipulate simple machines, alien tools, which were used to maintain the environment, open doors, or transport goods. These tools, at first seemingly impervious to human touch, began to behave differently under human influence. A door that had once opened only at the whim of an alien guard might open at the touch of a human finger. It was just a crack, a slight change in the power dynamics. But it was enough. With each small victory, the humans gained confidence, and the aliens began to notice. The breakthrough came when one of the humans discovered a critical flaw in the alien power systems. A member of the Resistance, an engineer by trade before being captured, began to trace the energy flow that powered the alien weapons and shields. The humans saw patterns, minute inconsistencies in the energy transfer, and realized that the technology was not perfect. Every system had a weakness, a flaw, and that flaw could be exploited. With careful observation, the engineer reverse engineered a basic understanding of the power grid that kept the alien machines running. It was a gamble, a risky, dangerous move, but it paid off. The engineer found a way to temporarily short-circuit a section of the alien ship's control system. The ship's internal alarms went off, the lights flickered, and for a brief moment, the humans were free from their energy restraints. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a glimpse into the possibilities. A weakness had been found. The humans now understood that, though the aliens' technology seemed impenetrable, it was far from flawless. This knowledge spread quickly among the captives. As one human figurehead, an unofficial leader of sorts, began to gather a small group of the most skilled individuals, hackers, engineers, linguists, and even doctors. Their collective knowledge began to grow. They could understand the alien language better. They knew how to bypass the security systems. They had learned how to manipulate the alien technology, even if just for a brief moment, and they could now make strategic decisions, interpreting the slightest signs of weakness in the alien infrastructure. The alien captors, for their part, had begun to notice strange shifts in the behavior of their human prisoners. They grew more observant, more defiant. They weren't as compliant as before. What had been a quiet and fearful population now began to show signs of rebellion, but the aliens dismissed it as nothing more than the inevitable and meaningless resistance of creatures in captivity. They underestimated the humans' ability to adapt. They believed that, like every other species they had captured before, the humans would eventually break. But they were wrong. As the days turned into weeks, the resistance began to grow stronger. The humans didn't just passively wait for an opportunity. They actively sought it. They continued to study the alien systems, learning how to manipulate the environment around them. They figured out how to access data terminals and encrypt communications. They discovered the patterns of alien patrols, the weaknesses in their guard security protocols. Small acts of sabotage began to take place. Food shipments went missing, doors were left unlocked, and alien technology was tampered with in ways that made their captors uneasy. The most significant change, however, was the humans' ability to understand and predict the aliens' behaviors. Having studied the language so intensely, they began to understand the subtle signals of alien communication. A shift in tone, a gesture, a momentary glance. It all meant something. Humans learned to use these signals to their advantage, anticipating their captors' moves and outsmarting them at every turn. One particular group of humans began to decode alien military tactics. They observed the aliens' communication systems and began to understand their strategic operations. They realized that the aliens were not invincible. They, too, had to follow patterns and obey certain operational rules. By exploiting those rules, the humans could manipulate their captors into making mistakes. The most critical realization came when they learned to manipulate alien energy fields that had once seemed impenetrable. They realized that the energy signatures that powered the alien ships were not stable. The humans, using their newfound knowledge, began to disrupt the power flow, causing power outages and surges in certain areas. It was like hitting a pressure point, small, targeted actions that, when combined, began to cause chaos for the aliens. What had started as mere survival instincts had turned into a full-fledged adaptation. Humans were no longer the helpless, passive victims they had been when first captured. They were learning, evolving, and finding ways to fight back. The aliens, for all their technological superiority, had underestimated the most dangerous thing about humanity: its ability to adapt quickly, to learn from its environment, and turn any situation into an advantage. And now, the aliens were starting to pay the price for that mistake. The humans were no longer just surviving. They were plotting, learning, and preparing for the next phase, their inevitable rise against their captors. As the humans' knowledge grew, so did their audacity. What had once been a faint hope, a flicker of resistance, was now a fully formed plan. The aliens, who had once viewed their human captives as little more than livestock, were now faced with a growing threat that they had not seen coming. The humans had adapted to their environment in ways the aliens could not have predicted. Their ability to learn, to improvise, and to outwit their captors had reached a point where the balance of power was beginning to tip. The harvest was supposed to be a one-sided affair, but now, the humans were the ones who controlled the narrative. One of the key turning points came when the humans managed to hijack an alien communications network. It wasn't easy. Getting access to the network was a monumental task, and the alien systems were designed to prevent exactly this kind of breach. But the humans, once again relying on their ingenuity, found a way. They had spent countless hours studying the alien data systems, observing the interactions between the different species that made up the alien empire. By deciphering their communication protocols, they learned to listen in on alien conversations. This gave them invaluable insight into the aliens' plans and vulnerabilities. For the first time, the humans were not merely responding to alien actions. They were anticipating them. Armed with information, they began to coordinate. Humans from different ships, different factions, and different environments were able to communicate, pooling their knowledge and skills. The alliances formed among them were diverse. No longer were humans divided by nationality or background. Now, they were unified by a common cause: the survival of their species and a desire for revenge against the aliens who had enslaved them. The humans started to disrupt the alien supply lines. Small sabotage missions turned into larger operations. They targeted the aliens' fuel supplies, their weapon storage, and their power grids. They didn't attack head-on. No, the humans were smarter than that. They used guerrilla tactics, hitting the aliens where it hurt the most and vanishing before the aliens could retaliate. Each victory, no matter how small, sent shockwaves to the alien empire. What had once seemed like an easy conquest now appeared to be spiraling out of control. One of the most significant breakthroughs came when the humans managed to reverse engineer a weapon used by the aliens for crowd control. The aliens had no idea how their devices were being used against them. At first, it was a small shockwave gun, capable of incapacitating an individual with a blast of energy. The humans, having studied the weapon thoroughly, learned how to replicate it, but they didn't stop there. They adapted the weapon to their own needs, increasing its power and range. Soon, the humans were armed with a devastating weapon that could incapacitate the aliens in moments. With their new weaponry, the humans' power grew. They didn't just target the alien soldiers. They struck at the heart of the empire. They attacked supply convoys, ambushed commanders, and sabotaged ships. The tide was shifting, and the aliens could no longer afford to underestimate their captives. The human rebellion had gone from an insignificant nuisance to a full-fledged war effort. The humans had become a force to be reckoned with. The turning point came when a large faction of humans successfully took control of an alien ship, a flagship that had been used to monitor and enforce the harvest. The aliens had expected the humans to cower in fear. Instead, they had fought tooth and nail for their freedom. The humans hijacked the ship, used their knowledge of alien tech to navigate the vessel, and made their way to the heart of the alien fleet. This wasn't just an act of survival. It was an act of defiance. As the humans began to gain ground, the aliens were forced to respond in force. But their response was slow and disorganized. They were used to dealing with primitive species that couldn't even understand the language of their captors, let alone pose a threat to their advanced technology. The humans, however, were not the same as the other species the aliens had conquered. They were resilient, resourceful, and capable of adapting at an astounding rate. The aliens could no longer rely on their overwhelming technological advantage because the humans had learned how to exploit their weaknesses. The humans had become the predators. The prey had risen up, armed with the knowledge of their captors, and now they had the tools and tactics to strike back. The alien empire, which had once seen the harvest as a simple task, was now caught in a battle for survival. The humans had become not just survivors, they had become conquerors in their own right. The first major battle took place on a vast alien fortress world, an outpost that had been used to house thousands of humans. This was the heart of the alien operation, the central hub where most of the human captives were kept. The humans, having gathered the intelligence they needed, launched a full-scale assault on the outpost. They used their stolen alien technology to infiltrate the defenses, disable the shields, and strike at the heart of the fortress. The battle was brutal, but it was also a turning point in the war. The humans, once divided and scattered, now fought as one. The aliens, overwhelmed and outmatched by the sheer will of the humans, began to fall back. They could no longer sustain their empire of oppression and exploitation. For the first time, the humans were in control. Their victory at the Fortress World marked the beginning of a new era, an era where humanity would no longer be subjugated. It was an era where humanity would rise, no longer prey but the predator. As the battle on the Fortress World raged, it became clear that the humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for vengeance, for justice, and for the freedom of their species. The aliens had underestimated them at every turn, thinking they could break their will, thinking they could use them as tools of labor and entertainment. But they had failed. Humanity had adapted, and now they were in the driver's seat. This was just the beginning. The aliens might have thought they had captured their prey, but they had unleashed something far more dangerous, an unstoppable force that would not rest until every last alien was driven from the stars. The humans had become more than just a force to be reckoned with. They had become a new power, one that would shape the galaxy in their image. And the aliens would soon learn that they had made the most catastrophic mistake of all. They had underestimated the adaptability and power of humankind. As the humans continued to adapt, their power surged exponentially. The once subjugated species had shed its shackles and now stood at the precipice of victory. What had started as a simple act of resistance had evolved into a coordinated, all-out war. The rebellion against the aliens had become a movement fueled by every human who had been wronged, every person who had suffered at the hands of their captors. The bond between humans grew stronger with every victory, as each battle added to collective resolve to fight for their freedom and future. The alien empire, once a seemingly unstoppable force, began to crumble under the weight of human ingenuity and perseverance. The humans were no longer content with simple sabotage. Now, they launched full-scale attacks on the aliens' most strategic installations, factories that produced their weapons, data hubs where they stored critical intelligence, and communication nodes that allowed them to maintain control over their vast network. The humans now knew how to disrupt the aliens' military command structures, how to blind them to their movements, and how to bring their mighty empire to its knees. But the war was far from over. The aliens, though shaken, were not ready to give up their hold on the galaxy. They launched counteroffensives, desperate to suppress the uprising. Yet, with each response, they found themselves facing a new, more formidable enemy. The humans had learned the intricacies of alien warfare. They had adapted their strategies to counteract the aliens' technological superiority. The humans knew the weaknesses in the aliens' fleet, the gaps in their intelligence networks, and flaws in their power systems. The aliens' once imposing military might was now being systematically dismantled, one strike at a time. The turning point came when the humans managed to capture one of the highest-ranking members of the alien coalition, a warlord responsible for overseeing the abductions of countless species. This alien was not only a political figure, but also one of the most feared commanders in the Empire. His capture was a symbol of humanity's growing strength. The humans, knowing that this victory would send shockwaves to the alien ranks, used their new prisoner as leverage. They interrogated him for critical intelligence, uncovering the alien empire's most closely guarded secrets, including their strategy to subdue the human uprising. But it wasn't just the military information that the humans sought. The warlord also revealed something far more significant, something that would change the course of the war entirely. Deep within the alien empire was a secret weapon, a technological marvel capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single strike. It was a weapon so powerful that, if it fell into the wrong hands, it could destroy entire worlds. The aliens had intended to use it as a final solution to end the human rebellion. But now, with the weapon's existence revealed, the humans understood that they had no choice but to destroy it before it could be used against them. A daring mission was launched to infiltrate the heart of the alien empire, where the weapon was kept. The humans, armed with their knowledge of alien technology and their newfound skill in combat, infiltrated the heavily fortified facility. The aliens, unaware of the growing threat, believed their weapon to be impenetrable. Yet, the humans had already learned how to exploit the weaknesses in the alien security systems. With a combination of stealth, precision, and overwhelming force, the humans breached the facility and reached the weapon. The weapon, an enormous energy cannon capable of devastating entire fleets, was housed within an impenetrable shield that no one had ever breached before. But the humans, having studied the alien technology for so long, had learned how to disable the shield, how to bypass its protective measures. It took every ounce of their skill and courage, but the humans succeeded. They destroyed the weapon, rendering the aliens' ultimate tool of destruction useless. The news of the weapon's destruction spread like wildfire through the galaxy. The aliens, who had once believed they were the supreme rulers of the stars, now found themselves without their greatest weapon. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. What had once been an empire of invincible conquerors was now a fractured, crumbling force. The humans, once the prey, had become the predators, and the aliens were now on the defensive. The war raged on, but the tide had turned irreversibly in favor of the humans. The aliens no longer had the upper hand. Every victory, every defeat of an alien stronghold, further demoralized the invaders. Humanity's resistance had become more than just a fight for survival. It had become a fight for justice, for retribution. The humans were no longer looking to escape their captivity. They were looking to wipe out the alien presence from every corner of the galaxy. As the final stages of the war unfolded, the humans launched a decisive series of strikes against the alien homeworld. This was the heart of the alien empire, the source of their power, the seat of their control over the galaxy. The mission was perilous, but the humans had grown too powerful to be stopped. Armed with advanced alien technology, superior strategies, and a fierce resolve to never be enslaved again, the humans infiltrated the heart of the empire. The final battle for the alien homeworld was brutal, but it was clear from the outset that the humans had the upper hand. The aliens, now scattered and demoralized, could no longer hold their ground. The human forces, united under a single banner, surged forward, overwhelming the last remnants of the alien defenders. When the dust finally settled, the alien empire lay in ruins. The once feared conquerors had been defeated by their own mistakes, by their underestimation of the human will to survive and adapt. The victory was not just one of military might. It was a triumph of human spirit. The humans had overcome their captors, had adapted to their technology, and had turned the tables in ways the aliens never could have imagined. What had begun as a simple harvest, an effort to subjugate and exploit, had turned into humanity's greatest victory. The humans, once prey, were now the rulers of their own destiny. In the aftermath, the human survivors celebrated not just their freedom, but their future. The aliens had made one fatal error. They had underestimated the adaptability of humankind. The humans had proven that no matter the odds, no matter how overwhelming the enemy, they would rise, learn, and fight back. The harvest had failed, not because the aliens had lost their power, but because humanity had outgrown the role of prey. The galaxy would never be the same again. The aliens had learned, far too late, that humans were not to be underestimated.